Squad boss.
Yo, what's up, people? Today we're gonna talk about Victor Chevalier, the military man, the super spy with the refined violence, the phantom raven, the ladies' man whooping people in his suit. Yeah, we're gonna go through some of his strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, so Victor, strengths and weaknesses. Well, one strength of this character I can surely tell you is that if you don't know the matchup, you're gonna be confused as hell with this man teleporting all over the place, all of these stance mix-ups. And I remember the first time I saw this guy, I was like so confused, like what is this character doing? But yeah, once you get more familiar with the matchup, you realize you have more options than you thought you had, and there's a bit more counterplay than you would realize. Another easy advantage to this character is that he has very quick buttons. Like, there is no major execution to what it is that he does. You kind of just have to mash the right button at the right timing, and the rest is to play around movement. So you can be very reactive to what it is that your opponent does and what it is that you see that they're doing, and you can punish accordingly or counter hit them at the right timing, because all you really have to do is just mash a button. And he has very good movement, so you can move around their pokes and that type of thing and launch them fairly well if you have good movement. A big weakness for this character for me is that Victor's small Tekken sucks. I mean, it has its goods and it has its bads, but I remember when I started playing this character, man, I was like, yo, what is this? The first thing is that his down forward one has zero range, so you have to be really up close, point blank range to make his down forward one effective. Even like one or two backdashes back and he can whiff. It feels like, in a game where everybody's moving around, like his down forward one just tends to whiff a lot and you get punished for it. It does have an extension, but that's a high and it can be ducked. It will give it a bit more range, but it's highly likely that if the first part of the down forward one misses, they're gonna duck that extension and you're gonna get launched. On hit, his downfall one puts him at +4, but for me he's most effective at +5, because +5 he has access to his counter hit tools already from that range. Is better. +4 gives him access to like his heat engagers and that sort of thing, but for me those things are better used as whiff punishers than like poking or so, because his heat extension can get ducked because it's a mid-high, and I wouldn't really just throw that out, and I guess that's more on a whiff punish, for example, or if you read the opponent's actions and you can throw it out as a counter hit. But like when you use his down forward one and you get them on hit, you only have +4, so there's not much you can do around that other than throw out small pokes. His punishers, they like give you like +3, so you can't really do much with +3. You're very likely to get parried or power crushed if you try to continue your pressure, so you kind of have to be guessing yourself. It's not like you surely have an advantage. You're still guessing as to what you can do next. There is still a lot of counterplay that the opponent has. His best punisher, I think, is 1+2, which is gonna give you +5, so if they mash anything you can hit them with a big counter hit. But the rest of his punishers kind of put him in a very awkward position where there's not much that you can do. You can't press your advantage too much, but you have a slight advantage. For me, I mean, I'm a small Tekken person, so like you want to know that when you get something, it can lead into something else, that can lead into something else, and you can kind of break down the opponent. Victor is a bit weird when it comes to that, because he has bad frames. On block, his frames are not so good, so it's like you lose your turn a lot on a lot of his pokes. So his 10 frame punish is minus, his 12 frame punish can get ducked if you don't do it correctly. The others are like highs, so they can get ducked. His down forward one has good frames on block, but as I said, the range is bad, but he has pretty good frames on block. So you don't have a solid mid check unless you're really, really up close. Then you can kind of move around it. So you can bait out whiffs, for example, down forward one, sidestep, that type of thing. You can bait out whiffs and get like, launches from people or put them down in that type of way if you're moving around. But I don't know, man, his frames are not so good, not in my opinion. there are other characters that have better frames. It's like Feng can just come in your face and just break it down and chip you down. And like, you know what I mean? Nina and those type of people, they can just break it down. Yeah, Victor isn't that kind of character. Also, he has really bad lows in my opinion. His lows are not very effective. His down 3, okay, you know, you can take a little bit of damage, like 11 damage. That's like nothing. I mean, it's something, but it's like nothing. Yeah. But you still have the ability to move around. You can't continue your pressure because you're minus, but at least you can sidestep or move around. His down 4 as the power crush killer, so that has some utility to it. Like when you, for example, when you get like a successful 10 frame punish, sometimes people try to power crush you. So you know, if you know that power crush is coming, then you can use the down 4 and just get that big counter hit, which is, I mean, technically is only 30 damage, but that's like a punish, you know. You know what I mean? It's not major damage, but that's still, you know, fairly decent, some damage. And they're on the floor, so you can get to continue your pressure with just running 2 or something else. It's down 1-1. I mean, that's a low high string, because so you know that can get ducked. That's best used on 2 situations. Like on counter hits, it's guaranteed. So that's when you read that they're gonna attack you and you want to go in with an evasive move. For example, maybe if you spot like an electric coming or something, you can use the down 1-1 to go under the electric, stuff like that, when you want that high crushing low. But yeah, you can't really use it as a poke because they'll just wait it out and just duck the high and launch you. So that's not really something that you want to be throwing out there like that. Also, as I said, it's fairly evasive and it puts you in crouch, so you have access to his full crouch tools, that sort of thing, you know. Down 1 while standing, 1+2, you know, forward into stance, you know, that type of thing. So you can continue his pressure, but you're minus on hit, you're -6, which is a big minus. So you have to really like know what you're doing, you know what I mean, based on what you think the opponent is gonna do. It's kind of a mind game once you're in this full crouch zone. Down back 4 is technically one of his best lows because it allows you to, you know what I mean, 1 is a counter hit launcher, so that's always good. If you read the opponent coming in with a certain move, or if they're gonna mash at the wrong time, you can counter hit launch them. And it also gives you a frame advantage on hit, which you can continue your pressure going into stance and so on and so on. But the thing is, it's a launch punishable, so like you can't rely on that, because if they block it one time, you know, you're gonna die. So like his small Tekken is really weird because you don't have the frames, you know, you don't have the damage, not really, and you don't have the lows to break someone's guard so much or to open up your opponent, not really. So it's kind of a bit weird when it comes to Victor. Like, you know, up close you really have to just be thinking about like making the opponent just suffer for every mistake that they make, as opposed to trying to break them down yourself, you know what I mean? It's kind of like stick and move, punish, play around with spacing and that type of thing. However, where Victor does excel, I believe one of his biggest strengths is spacing. He has a lot of spacing tools to make space and tools to maintain the space, and even some tools to close in and cut the space down, so that you can really, you know, beat your opponent in that spacing game and punish their mistakes, as well as, you know, just break them down from various distances. When you're up close, for example, he has tools like, you know, back 1 that creates that space that you can use, for example, to create whiffs, you know what I mean, sidestep, that type of thing, if they read it wrong. There's also a counter hit tool, as you know, but I think one of the biggest advantages of this move is that you can use it to create space or create pressure, you know what I mean. You can play around the spacing with him up close. At range, he has a pretty long range move in back 3 that really like good for keep out, as well as good for whip punishing from a long range, but it's -13, so you don't really want to get that blocked, you know what I mean. You're gonna eat a punish, but -13 is honestly not that bad. You can eat a 12 frame punish or a 13 frame punish, lose some life or some damage, but it's not like -14 where some people can't launch you, so it's still reasonably okay. but you really kind of just want to you lose your turn if the back three is blocked, but that's not so bad. But that's more of like a space control tool. As I say, he has big buttons from this range. You have back three or back 3 1+2 if you see the whiff punish clear. It's a bit slower, but at range, when you see those big moves with, you can get in and punish them. He also has, he also has the gunshot that any range, whatever, he can make you feel that gunshot from any range. So, that's like a big space control tool that he can use and easy access into his stance. He has forward 1+2, which is a decent chip damage. And that's a heat engager, like it can make people afraid to step into you. It's fairly slow, but it does do some damage, and it's kind of a scary tool up close. He was the Clive before Clive. But that's a really good tool. It's forward 1+2. Sometimes, you can't really use lows, so you have to resort to using chip damage in the place of a low to take off some life. So you just hit that forward 1+2 sometimes and just take off some chip and, continue spacing around and playing your pressure. He's down forward 2. He's not safe. It's -14. -14 is very dangerous in this game, so you can't really throw out he's down forward 2. But you know what I mean, when you can play with space like stuff like this, you can backdash down forward 2, we can create whiff stats sort of thing. So he's pretty good at the spacing game, like really and truly. He really excels when it comes to space. He also can just teleport, get a whiff punish, that sort of thing. People trying to do their running moves on you can just teleport out the way, launch them, that sort of thing. He's really, he's really good at spacing. So that's kind of a big strength for Victor. You kind of really want to just play around with the spacing, and then when you in close, you make them hurt from all the mistakes that they make. When you get out in the open, you just kill them. A big weakness for me is his stance pressure. It doesn't have a lot of ways to get into stance successfully, unless you really confirm the hit. Then you still only have a bunch of limited options in stance, especially this stance here, the lie stance. His fastest option out of lie is very risky in my opinion. You don't really want to just mash it out. Like that button there is -12, and the fastest option that keeps you in plus frames is a mid-high, so they can really just duck that and launch you. So most times when you end up in this stance, the lie stance, it's like you really just in a mind game. For poking, if you want frames up close, you can have to go resort to his 1-2. That gives you really good frames where you can threaten his counter hit tools. Or you have to go for his down forward 3, which is going to put you at +5. Once again, you can pressure his tools, but the thing is, if they block you down forward 3, you lose your turn, right? And they can't come to the high, because if they duck that, you're gonna die. It's a mid-high. So getting into stance, if you find ways to get into the stance, you're only +4, for example, and at +4, the only option that you really have is just going for the riskiest option. The fastest option out of his stance is the riskiest option, and for me, that's like a big problem. The rest of the options, they're fairly safe, but they're slower, so if they mash, they can hit you out of them. But his fastest option is kind of launch punishable, because if they duck it, you die. So it's really like a mind game when you go into stance. There's nothing that you can threaten that's guaranteed, like a guaranteed safe option. He doesn't really have that. So that's like when you go into stance, you're really just rolling the dice, and that's really, for me, that's not such a good thing. The casino gameplay isn't always the best route for me, in my opinion. You should at least have one safe option that you can just rely on, if you're not sure what the opponent is gonna do, to just check them or keep things calm. He doesn't really have that. He has to take risks to get damage. Like, he really has to take risks out of stance to get damage, and I don't find that that's a really good thing. His heat is good and bad at the same time, because when he does certain moves out of stance, he gets back heat. So he can keep his heat for really long and maintain his heat state for a longer period of time. But the bad side of that, again, is that he has to take risks. So if you make one mistake during heat and he stands pressure, you can really take some damage. You can get launched if they duck one of your highs or something, and you just take a lot of damage. So even though you have access to maintain your heat state longer, you have to take risks to do it. So it kind of opens you up as the attacker, you know what I mean? And you can't really play safe with Victor. You kind of really just have to just go. It's like an all or nothing type of thing, and I don't know if that's a good thing. So for me, I kind of it's weird, but it's a strength and a weakness at the same time. It's kind of 50-50 in my opinion. The last strength I'm gonna mention for Victor is that his panic moves. I like his panic moves to some extent. I mean, in some ways they're risky, but if you know to use them in the right scenarios, especially at lower level, you're gonna make people salty. You know, you really can take advantage of these things at a lower level, intermediate level, and even sometimes at the advanced level if they don't know the matchup. So because at advanced level, people tend to play a bit more safe, so they don't know certain things are coming when you do it, because they're like, nobody's gonna try this, and then when you try it, they don't know how to deal with it. For example, as I said, you know, his teleport, you can use it to make certain moves with, and you can launch people. His teleport is a pretty good panic tool and spacing tool at the same time. There are certain situations like this move, he's unblockable, he dashes back first, so if you use it at the right time to evade a move, after the move gets evaded, they highly likely that they will freeze up. Some people won't. I mean, they will know the move if they know the matchup really well. Once they see him go back into stance, they just sidestep it. But other people, they will just like block or crouch, because oftentimes they feel like, oh, he's too far back, he won't hit me. But the range on this thing is insane. You have to sidestep. Like, you can't think like, oh, he's out of range, he's not gonna hit me, because highly likely that he will hit you with this move, because the range is just insane on that move, and that factor alone causes it to work a lot of the time, and you get 50 damage. I mean, you can't enforce pressure after it, because the animation afterwards, when he puts away his sword, it takes away your advantage, but it's highly likely that it will work. For example, on Wake Up, if you just like hit this move, a lot of times people hit it. Or if you use it as an evasive tool, like if you see something coming and you just go back, hit them with this, bam, 50 damage, easy. His other evasive tool is, it's not so safe on block. It's kind of risky, honestly. I think it's launch punishable. Yeah, it is launch punishable, so like you kind of need to be careful with this. Like, you really have to know they're gonna mash to use it. And on hits, when they get so much, you kind of just like knock them down, and it's just like, not that much. I mean, you get to pressure them, put some more pressure on them, but it's not really that big of an advantage for the risk that you have to take to do this move. So this one is like a life or death type of thing, when you know that you just need to just not get hit, then you pull it out. But yeah, and of course the infamous, the one where he teleports from the sky. I don't know what he says, I don't speak French, people, I'm sorry, but like this move is super toxic, but it's only makes sense to use it in heat. When you don't use it in heat, it's not punishable, so it has a lot of risk to it. But in heat, it becomes toxic. But oftentimes you can tell that it's coming, because it's in the heat state, the kind of Victor that you're playing most of the time, so you can kind of see this move coming, so you can sidewalk it. But yeah, it's a really good panic tool. He also has his back tool, which for me is more like a counter hit tool. Like if you have the frames and you don't know they're gonna mash, then you can use the back tool and you can get a free heat engage. But I find that it's a bit slow for a parry. I find it's a bit slow, so It's not really a parry to me. It's more like a counter hit tool. So like, if you see that they're gonna try to do something, then you just pull it out. If you know you have the frames, you pull it out before, and you just catch them in their jab or something, and then you just get a hit engage on them or a launch or something. So for me, it's more of a counter hit tool than a parry tool, because you throw it out just when you know the opponent is about to attack, and you just get that move on them. So yeah, that's how I feel about Victor. I mean, in the beginning when I started playing this character, I really didn't. I hated this character when I started playing him. I was like, yo, what is this? And it's mainly because I really like Small Tekken, and his Small Tekken is not so good. It's kind of weird, but the tools that he has to use weren't the tools that I was accustomed to using, so it took me a little bit of time to adjust to his style. But once I adjusted to his play style, I found that he's not so bad. I can see why a lot of people say that he's mid-tier and not in the top tiers, you know what I mean? But he's a pretty solid character, and he's pretty easy to use. So he's a beginner friendly character, and he's good all around. He's also a fairly fun character to use, so you know what I mean? I recommend this character, if you just like, to do some cool stuff and to enjoy the game. He's that kind of character. He's flashy, easy buttons, cool moves. Yeah, a fun character.
Squad boss.